I have to say, this is incredibly high tech. Apparently, you can just scan the QR code. That's the first for me. So I'm really looking forward to your questions, and know that you can ask whatever you want to ask. Like, there's no limits. Thank you, Betty, for that wonderful introduction. As you were speaking, I had said to Betty when I first met her, when I first arrived today, that when I was writing this book in 2017, late 2017, I was preparing to leave the country. That's why the first line of the book is, I don't know where I'll be when you read this book, because I was literally planning on leaving. And the thing that I probably least expected is that the book would be read in schools. I just was not thinking about that. I was thinking Obama may read it and may not like it, because I kind of, neither would Bill Clinton, and I used to be a political reporter, so I kind of know the people that are around them, I was not thinking that students would be reading the book. And what I told Betty and what I said to JJ is, I can't think really of a bigger compliment than that. So the fact that this book is on this campus, in this state, means a lot to me. So thank you. Thank you for the people who selected the book. I did not know them, so I didn't bribe them or anything. I don't know. So thank you for that. I prepared some remarks, and then again, I'm looking forward to your questions, which is why please scan the QR code. But I kind of wanted to give some context into the work that I do, right? So this question, how do you define American? Before the pandemic began, I was actually traveling for almost a decade, just nonstop across the country. I think I'd done 900 events in 49 states, anywhere but Alaska. And because I'm a journalist by training, I really sought out to talk to people who wanted to arrest me and deport me. So as much as possible, engaging with chambers of commerce in Nebraska, meeting with Trump supporters in Alabama, going to places where I could really say, hi, I'm right here. What's going on? I think more than ever, it's really important to engage with people who don't agree with you and who don't share your system of reality. So I was traveling all across the country, right? Talking to everybody, regardless of age, race, political orientation, asking this question. So how do you define who's an American? Is it the DREAM Act? People don't know, by the way, that the DREAM Act has not passed. It was introduced in the Senate in 2001, and it still has not passed. So every state has to figure out what it's going to do with its undocumented students. And if you're undocumented in North Carolina, you can't go to any of the community colleges, right? So comprehensive immigration reform. This country has not amended its immigration system since the mid-'80s, right? For almost 40 years. So is that how we define American? Pieces of papers like green cards, passports, does that define who an American is, right? I don't know if you've ever actually seen a green card. It looks like that. It's not even green. So my grandfather gave that to me when I arrived to this country. You may have read this already, but so I was born in the Philippines. Then I woke up one day. My mom said I was going to America to live with her parents. I didn't ask. I was just kind of, all I knew was in America was Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. And Michael Jackson in the Thriller music video. So I was excited about coming here, but I didn't know that I would be leaving her. So I left her, and she sent me to live with her parents, my grandparents. And then my grandfather gave me this green card, right? And to be honest, it was really hard to adjust to this country, but probably one of the biggest things I had to adjust to was race identification. Because I'm Filipino, right? I was not Asian until I got here. So all of a sudden, I'm in middle school, 6th grade, and I am introduced as someone who's Asian. And people are Filipinos, Koreans, Chinese, Vietnamese, Pakistanis, Indians, Japanese, and then all of a sudden we get here and we're Asian. Kind of in the same things with people from Latin America, right? People are Mexicans, Salvadorans, Ecuadorians, Colombians, Chileans. Here, depending on the language you use, they're Latinas, Latinos, Latinx, Hispanic, right? So I was like, wait a second. So did this country that make up black or white also created the Asian thing and the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx thing? What is going on? And then since I look like this, and my name is Jose Antonio Vargas, so where do I fit in that conversation? right? And then things got even more confusing when 4 years after arriving here, I went to the DMV to get a driver's license, which is what you do when you're 16 years old. And I found out that this green card was fake. Did not know it was fake, because how would I know? The woman at the DMV, she had curly hair, glasses. She was racially ambiguous. I didn't know what she was. All I remember was she looked down on the thing, she flipped my green card, and she said, "This is fake, don't come back here again," right? And this was in 1997, before Google, so I thought I may be the only non-Mexican person who had a fake green card, because the television, TV news, the newspaper, the radio, whenever anybody said anything about fake anything or people who are here illegally, it was always Mexican. And I actually was going to tell this woman, the DMV woman, "Hey, I'm not Mexican, I'm Filipino." But isn't that amazing how I've internalized, just because the media that I was consuming, I'd internalized that this was a Mexican thing, right? My salvation came in two forms. One, Mrs. Dewar, my English teacher, said I asked too many annoying questions and I should be a journalist. I had no idea what that was. I'm Filipino, as I said. I come from a family of like nurses, security guards, farmers. There were no writers in my family. And so I'm like, wait, what do you mean journalist? I couldn't believe that you could get paid by asking people questions. But Mrs. Dewar said, when you're a journalist, your name gets to be on the paper, right? When you read an article, it says by somebody, right? So my 17-year-old brain was thinking, wait a second, if I'm not here because I don't have the right papers, well, what if my name was on the paper? Wasn't that another way of existing? So this is a profile. You know the New Yorker magazine that has long-ass articles? So this is one of those long-ass articles. I wrote like a 10,000-word profile of Mark Zuckerberg for the New Yorker. And this is a big deal for me because I thought writing for the New Yorker, where they use like $10 words, I thought if I get to write for the New Yorker, like I have hit like I'm in. Who cares about green cards? Right? So I thought that was one way of salvation, was to be so successful, be the good immigrant that people want us to be, that this would be enough. So that was one way of salvation. The other salvation for me, and frankly the more important one, was this book by Toni Morrison. I was assigned to read this book when I was in 8th grade. I hate to say, by the way, that this is one of the most banned books in America, is this book. So I was assigned by my 8th grade teacher, Mr. Zahner, to read this book, and it just floored me. How many people here have read The Blues Eye? Can you raise your hand? So I was really confused by this book. I was confused by it. I was confused by the fact that why did this young black girl, Picola, wanted to have blue eyes? Like, why wasn't her black eyes enough? And then why did she believe it? Right? Like, what was happening all around her that she actually believed that blue eyes were better than black? Right? And the way Morrison wrote the book, the architecture of the book, like the way it's constructed, the way it's written, everything about it to me was fascinating. So much so that I went to the public library, and the young people here might not know this. There's this machine called microfiche. Do you know what that is? It's like this gigantic machine in the middle of a library. You go in there, you sit in front of it, and you look at articles, and then you print them. So I remember spent 5 hours at the microfiche at the Los Altos Public Library, printing everything I could find about this book. And I found an interview that Toni Morrison gave to some guy named Bill Moyers. I didn't know who he was. Right? And they had this exchange. This is the exchange from the interview. Bill Moyers tells Toni Morrison, "I don't think I've ever met a more pathetic creature in contemporary literature than Picola Breedlove." Then Morrison interrupts and says, "She surrendered completely to the so-called master narrative." What's that? Bill Moyers says. The master narrative. Is that life? Bill Moyers says. Nope. The master narrative, Toni Morrison said, is whatever ideological script that is being imposed by the people in authority on everybody else. The master fiction, history, it has a certain point of view. So when these little girls see that the most prized gift at Christmas time is this little white doll with blue eyes, that's the master narrative speaking. This is beautiful, right? this is lovely, and you're not it. And then Morrison describes the character she created. She said, she's so needful, so completely needful, has so little, needs so much. She becomes the perfect victim. I remember underlining the perfect victim. And I remember reading this transcript over and over again, someone who's not black or white, wondering, wait a second, what is this perfect victim thing? And in my mind, being a victim and being this illegal, this alien, were one and the same. I convinced myself that someone, somewhere, somehow created this master narrative of illegality. Human beings identified as illegals, as if one's existence can be defined as unlawful. Illegals, serving Americans, either by babysitting your kids or trimming your lawns or constructing your houses or harvesting your crops. Probably half of all farmers in this country are here without proper documents, right? So all of those images and visuals perpetuated by the news media, corroborated in TV shows and movies, human beings being told what they cannot do and where they cannot go. I mean, you gotta love America. Perhaps only in America can Toni Morrison, to me, arguably the greatest writer in the English language, an African-American woman whose grandfather lived in a time when it was illegal for African-Americans to read. Somehow, this African-American woman liberated an undocumented gay Filipino. That's exactly what she did. She liberated me in such a way that 14 years after discovering that I was in the country illegally, wait, something just happened with the thingy here. I think ice got into the presentation. I'm kidding. Wait, can you see it? Okay, I think those are JJ's kids. What happened? There you go, I think we're good. So I did that. Isn't that the most horrible? Thanks, JJ. It's JJ's laptop. Isn't that the most horrible photo? My niece finally said to me, Uncle, you could have totally fixed your hair. When they took the photo. So against the advice of 28 immigration lawyers, inspired by Toni Morrison's master narrative, I did this. And when I did this 11 years ago now, I was prepared for everything. I closed all my credit cards. I was, at that point in 2011, President Obama, during that year, deported 400,000 immigrants. He was averaging 400,000 immigrants a year, right? I know you all forgot this, that before Trump happened, Obama happened. And before Obama, there was Bush and then there was Clinton, and there was all a mess, right? And I know Obama. I've interviewed him before. And I'm like, I'm right here. The only people that contacted me was Bill O'Reilly, of course. Bill O'Reilly, Stephen Colbert. I did all those shows, right? Because, I was like this person that they couldn't believe that I just passed, that I'm not the stereotype. And when people ask me, why did I do this? The answer for me has always been, in a society where my existence is defined and limited by laws that haven't even passed, right? Freedom came from really owning my own story and telling the story. But the reality is, mine is just one story, right? It's just one story. And there's a whole narratives of stories that we tell about people, right? The reality is we need more stories to change the anti-immigrant narrative that's taken a deep hold of our country. It's been fascinating for me watching what's happening in the Ukraine, the tragedy and what's happening in Ukraine, and how we've talked about Ukrainians and the need for refugees and this need for them to claim asylum. And yet somehow the people who are our very neighbors who are coming to us from not that far away, we can't seem to want to call refugees, right? All of a sudden they just get to be illegal aliens or just illegals. I can't even really talk to you about the stunt that happened 2 weeks ago with the migrants, right? Like some part of the chess moves being hoodwinked, right, by the governor of Florida. I don't know, he seems bored. And just plopping people like they're just pawns so they can get on Fox News. Like, this is what immigration is, right? Like, this is what happens. And what's largely missing are the economic and historical context. In this country, we want to wave two flags, right? A flag that says keep out, then 10 yards in, what do we say? Help wanted. right? I was looking at the statistics about the undocumented population in Pennsylvania and the fact that they work across all of these industries, right? In this state, if you're undocumented, thankfully there is movement around giving undocumented people in Pennsylvania driver's licenses, but that's not law yet. So you have, what, 170,000 undocumented people here in Pennsylvania? I think that's a conservative estimate. How do they get to work? Do they take SEPTA? Is SEPTA across the state? No. So what do? Oh, they just drive. And then, hope and pray. A lot of us are Catholics. Hope and pray that we don't get arrested just by dropping our kid off to school or going to work, right? And to me, at a time of national and international instability, wars being waged, climate change, economic and political factors driving more people to move out of their borders, how can we promote narratives that humanize people and their experiences? So before I go on, I kind of want to define some terms, right? So a story. Everybody here has a story, right? A story is a singular account of one person's experience. Narrative is a system of stories and messages across all mediums, platforms, channels. I just got into TikTok. I'm still kind of confused, but I think I get it, right? So all those TikTok videos that create this narrative that provide a foundation for the way we see the world around us. I can employ several metaphors and similes here, but if stories are the way we organize ourselves, then narratives are the roads we traffic in. Let me repeat. If stories are the way we organize ourselves, then narratives are the roads we traffic in. Narrative is like oxygen. It's the air we breathe. Narrative, to me, is the level at which society moves. So, treating undocumented workers like they're less than you, that they should be paid less than you, that they should work for you, but they shouldn't be able to allowed to drive, that's a deeply seated narrative. Right? How do we break that? So on the very first day that I told my story, I created this organization, and I have to say starting a nonprofit is the hardest thing I've ever done. Right? And our strategies and tactics at Define American are all media-centric. The TV shows you watch, the films you watch, the news media you consume on radio or online, right? And the digital media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok videos. A couple of years ago, I discovered this YouTube channel called PragerU. Anybody here familiar with it? Can you raise your hand if you've heard of it? Ooh, one person. I had no idea that PragerU is like the Fox News of YouTube, right? So literally, if you're a student, I heard about it from the college Republican at Ohio State University. I asked him, hey, where do you get your information on YouTube? PragerU. And I'm like, is that a university? Nope, it's this makeup thing on YouTube. And literally, you could binge watch an anti-immigrant ideology over the weekend. And no one goes against it, right? It's just there. No one's challenging it. No one's fact-checking. Facts, right? So what we do at Define American is we believe that you cannot change the politics of immigration until you change the culture in which immigration is talked about and the way immigrants are seen. And the media, what we consume, shapes those conversations around immigrants and how we are perceived. And to me, facts, context, and history really, really matter. Really matter. And this issue is so misunderstood, drowning with so much misinformation, that the number one question I get asked by everybody, today, it's happened twice already today, is this question of, wait, like, why don't you just get legal? So I've been here 30 years next year, and even though I'm probably the most privileged undocumented immigrant in America, if there's no actual process for me to follow, how do you think undocumented immigrants who are lost in the system can legalize themselves, right? Like there's no line to get in the back of, right? There's no process that we should be following. And marriage, people always ask me, hey, why don't you just get married? Because, same-sex marriage is legal now. Well, you don't need to know that. But also, because I admitted to all the laws I broke, right? So even marriage can't just adjusting my citizenship status through marriage is not possible for me because I admitted to all the laws I broke. That's why the lawyers 11 years ago were like, you cannot say in the New York Times that you falsified claim to U.S. citizenship. Apparently it's the highest offense under immigration law. So that's not an easy solution. And since undocumented immigrants are the only working group in this country who pay local, state, and federal taxes yet cannot vote in elections, let me repeat, we're the only million, they say 11 million undocumented immigrants? I gotta tell you though, if I were to count all the undocumented white people I meet at Starbucks and the undocumented black immigrants that we don't count, I think it's way more than 11 million people. But can you think of any other demographic that we are on the menu on every election cycle and we don't get to order? We don't get to vote, right? Election after election. So our job at Define American is how do we influence the people telling these stories? And a big part of that work for us is research. This is the journalist in me, right? So we have a toolkit for journalists who interview immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants. We do original and rigorous research studies that looks at how anti-immigrant content spreads on social media sites like YouTube, and reports that look at how TV shows portray immigrant characters and storylines. So since Trump was elected president, at Define American, we've consulted on 120 television shows. So when you see an undocumented character on Grey's Anatomy or Orange is the New Black, right? Actually, we're working with Abbott Elementary next year, which I'm really excited about, which is a great show here in Philly, right? They're gonna introduce a character that's gonna be great. So when you see those immigrant characters, especially the undocumented ones on television shows, we've consulted on those shows, right? And we help them make sure that they're presenting immigrants in an authentic way, right? And we've actually partnered with the Norman Lear Center at the University of Southern California to study how immigrants are portrayed in TV shows. So last year we published this study and we found some really interesting things that I just wanna share with you. So immigrants, whenever you see an immigrant on TV, they're mostly associated with crime. So let me make sure, let me make this very, very clear. So I am here illegally without authorization from the government. When I fly out of Philadelphia airport tomorrow to go to Boston, I can get arrested at the airport, right? That's just, so I have lawyers, we're prepared for that, right? But I as a person am not illegal. I am here illegally, but I am not illegal. Also, being here illegally without proper authorization for most undocumented people is a misdemeanor offense, right? But because the narrative on this is that you're a criminal, people assume, make that perception reality, that we're a bunch of criminals. And that's how TV portrays it. We also found out through the study that undocumented immigrants are heavily represented. So here in the state of Pennsylvania, you have about 1 million immigrants, right? The largest immigrant groups are people from the Dominican Republic, India, China, Mexico, I think Vietnam was the last 5. So you have 1 million immigrants. Out of those 1 million immigrants, 20% are undocumented. Many of them, by the way, live in the same family, right? Mixed status families. But on TV, especially during the Trump era, whenever you saw an immigrant, they portrayed the character as undocumented. So that's a big, big issue. And then this one, to me, is something that we're actually really working on right now. Immigrants with disabilities, transgender immigrants, and black immigrants are largely invisible. 1 out of 10 black resident in this country right now is a black immigrant. 1 out of 10. Right? And yet there's no undocumented black character anywhere on television. So armed with this research, we actually go to producers, directors, and writers and say, hey, if you want to create the first undocumented black character from Haiti or Jamaica, right, or Nigeria, here's some information. This is what we do. Now, traveling across the country, I get lots and lots of questions, but rarely does someone ever ask me what this actually feels like. So I'm 41. Next year is my 30th year in this country. I have to be honest with you. When I get the taxes every year, that's when I really get depressed. Because my lawyers are like, Jose, you got to pay the taxes. I'm like, okay, fine. Because I was going to revolt and be like, until you make me a citizen, I'm not paying your taxes. But my lawyers are like, Jose, we don't want you to get arrested. You pay your taxes, right? But then I ask myself, what am I paying for exactly? What am I a part of? Right? And I think I'm so used to being divorced from this, America is for people with papers, right? That it actually, that kind of severance from what happens when people who are a part of a society are not treated like they're a part of a society. Then what happens, right? So that's why I wrote this book. That is not my thumbprint. That is my handwriting, it's not my thumbprint. By the way, my name Jose doesn't have an accent on the E, because when I turned in the book, I love copy editors. You know what copy editors are? They're the ones that like correct your mistakes. So I turned in the manuscript, and the copy editor was like, "Hey, Jose, you forgot your accent on the E." And I said, "I'm Filipino, we don't put accents in our Spanish names." "Why?" I was like, I don't know. I think it's like against Spanish colonialism. She was like, "That's not a response. Can you find out?" So then I found this linguist anthropologist at Stanford, Professor Jonathan Rosa, who explained to me that what happened was my name doesn't have an accent because after the Spanish left, Americans took over the Philippines, right? We were the first practice an empire. The Philippines was the first time this country imperialized another country. And when you got to the Philippines, you bought your own typewriters, and your typewriters didn't have accent marks. So there's a whole group of people with Spanish names, right, under American imperialized Philippines that don't have ñes or accent marks in their names. So I wrote this book, and my goal in the book, because I wrote it when I was 37, and honestly, I didn't think 37-year-olds should be writing memoirs. I'm like, I'm barely 40. You know, like life begins at 40, I think. So I was like, how do I write this book so I can actually like write about it without feeling like I'm not old enough to write this book? So I ended up, thankfully, coming up with this structure of lying, passing, hiding, right? So I divided the book in 3 sections. Lying was the first one, because that's what we have to do. So this is what got me in trouble with my lawyers. And now, by the way, when I published the book, my lawyers was like, "Jose, you can't put this in the book." And I was like, "Well, I already lied. So like, what do you mean? Like, we should just tell people what happens, right?" So you know when you get a job, you get an employment form, and you get these 3 boxes, right? I had to figure out what to check. Now, I can't check the first box because I'm not a U.S. citizen or national. I can't check the second one because I'm not a lawful resident. And I can't check the last one either because I don't have an alien number or admission number. So what do? I want the job. I wanted the job. So I checked the first one, and this is actually from the book. I'm just going to read from the book. This is so crazy. I wrote in the book, "Naive as it sounds, I remember thinking, yes, I am lying, but I'm going to earn this box." I don't remember how many times I said it to myself, I am going to earn this box. What I always remember is hearing people say that people like me should earn our citizenship. Exactly how I would earn being a citizen, I had no idea. What I did know, however, was that I was lying, and that my grandfather's lies were now my lies. I was no longer this blameless kid who wasn't aware of the circumstances of how I arrived in this country. I was now, at the time when I first did this, a 19-year-old making a difficult and necessary choice to survive, which meant breaking the law. And in the book, this is one of the few times in the book that I actually turned to the reader to ask, what would you have done? Would you have worked under the table? Right? Stay under the radar? Not work at all? Which box would you check? What have you done to earn your box now? It's a really uncomfortable conversation, right? What if all the undocumented immigrants in this country went around and asked all of you, what have you earned? What have you done to earn being here? Have you earned it? Or, you're an American because you're born here. Is that how the country got to be so great? It's a hard question. And I don't want to get into this position where we compare resumes. You don't want to do that, right? Do you know the kind of courage it takes for people to leave what they know, to come here, not speak the language, to be treated and spoken to like dirt, and then to make something out of themselves? That right there, by the way, is the story of not only Mexicans and Filipinos, that's the stories of Italians, Irish, Eastern Europeans. That's our collective story, right? So lying was the biggest part. And then you pass. When I found out I was here illegally, the first thing I did was get rid of my Tagalog accent. because I thought if I sounded, in this country, you love like European accents, right? French accent is cute, German accent is intellectual, but if you have like a Tagalog or a Mandarin or a Mexican accent, people look down on you. So I was like, how do I talk like Bill Moyers with a little bit of Dr. Dre? So I figured if I can talk like Dr. Dre with Bill Moyers mixed in, I was okay. And then you hide a lot. And in many ways, I was really hiding, in plain sight, right? I remember the most time I spent here in Philly, in this area, was when I was a reporter covering Hillary Clinton during the primary race in 2008. And, Hillary Clinton was the former first lady, so she was surrounded by Secret Service agents all the time. And I was on her plane, riding on her plane, and I was prepared for anybody to find out. It was like a ticking time bomb. You know that Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart? I was like that on a campaign plane, wondering how are they going to find out that the green card is fake and all of that. So the hiding part is the biggest part for me. And in this hiding from like what this has cost us. So that's my mom. So I haven't seen her for 30 years, right? So I'm not allowed, if I leave, there's no guarantee I'd be allowed back. That, by the way, is because of what Bill Clinton passed into law in the mid-1990s, right? She has been waiting patiently to come here for 26 years now. Because if you come from the Philippines or Mexico or India, that's how long you wait to get a visa, right? And this book, that's why when you read the book, you probably would know that she gets the last say in the book. The last line of the book is her voice, because I thought that's kind of what I owed her, right? That this was her choice, right? And I'm going to share this one other thing with you. I got this message I finally figured out that you can DM on Instagram. I did not know this. The young people are laughing. I only thought you could DM on Twitter. So thankfully, my niece had my phone, and my niece was like, "Uncle, you have all of these DMs on Instagram that you're not reading." And one of them was this. I met her at this book event in LA. What really got me, though, is what she said at the very end. Why keep going? What is this fight leading up to? She's 19 years old, also from the Philippines. She doesn't qualify for DACA because now 90% of high school graduates who are undocumented don't qualify for DACA. Everybody here knows what DACA is? Okay. So that's amazing that people know what that is. And she just didn't know what to do anymore. And then I didn't really know what to say. So then I responded, I got her on the phone. And then I said to her, "I'm really glad you're getting a college degree and just figuring out how to go to college." She's in a community college, transferring to another college. And I said to her, though, that what's really important is you find mentors if you don't have, she didn't have any at the time. This was last year when I spoke to her. To me, so much of our survival in this country is if the door is being slammed at your face, then you have to open windows, right? And you have to find people who are going to open windows. And if freedom can't come from the government, local or federal, then freedom must come from people. So surround yourself with people who are going to make you feel free. There's a chapter in the book where I literally name everybody who's ever helped me. And I did that because I thought that I wouldn't, when I'm wherever I am, this is a very friendly place. I'm going to Mississippi in a couple of weeks. That's not going to be quite a friendly place. When I go to a place like this, I carry everybody with me. Like everybody who's ever been kind to me. I could name all of the teachers. I could name all of the mentors. Because I can't be up here alone, right? So you bring people with you. You carry them with you. And in some ways, Toni Morrison's inspiration. I believe that the narrative around immigrants in this country and in the world, and I've been really happy to see that the Pope has spoken eloquently about migrant rights as human rights. And I sincerely hope that he continues to do that, right? But changing this narrative, this is radical work, right? At a time when my iPhone has more migrant rights than I do, this can be manufactured in China, delivered to Cupertino, ended up in Europe where I buy it. At a time when companies are borderless, at a time when capitalism continues to be borderless? Well, what about people? This is radical work, and I think we all have to be a part of it. Thank you for having me here. Okay, questions? JJ, how do you want to do this? QR codes?
Yeah, we're going to look some up here. So if you can click to the next slide.
Oh, next slide.
If you go right there, if you can scan the QR code, we're going to check it right up front, and we can go ahead and get
You're
some
going to make me
questions.
nervous if you don't ask questions. So somebody please ask me something.
And then if it's all right, we can walk around.
Yeah, you want to be Oprah? You can do that too.
So the first one is, why do you often speak specifically to colleges? What do you hope that we will take away from your story, and how should we carry it with us?
Well, college is probably one of the top, the other group that I speak to a lot of chambers of commerce and Kiwanis clubs, neutral places, right? Colleges because they get invited, and also because I'm surprised at how many colleges have assigned this book. And again, I'm really thankful for that. And what I hope students get is that when we say immigration reform, it's actually not this like intangible thing that depends on what's happened in DC and Congress. It actually is about you, right? So like, what are you gonna do in the classroom when some instructor says something that is incorrect about this issue? Like, how are you gonna advocate if you find out that one of your classmates is undocumented, right? How do you change policies? I'm really excited about this. This fall, Define American is launching this a whole program. If you're an artist who happens to be an immigrant, right? So many of the scholarships and the fellowships and awards have citizenship requirements, right? From the MacArthur Genius Grant to the Rockefeller or whatever, right? So we've contacted all these organizations and say, okay, you say you're immigrant friendly, but have you noticed that you're actually leaving people out by saying that you have to be a US citizen? So we're about to change that. So when you have all of these awards and scholarships, are they open to everybody? What does that mean, actually, right? So I think there's many things that you can be doing in your own campus, in your own within your own families. The last thing I want to say about this, I'm glad that people are like calling people out on Twitter and social media, but I'd rather you call out all your relatives at home. Thanksgiving is coming up. The most uncomfortable conversations I have is with my racist uncles and aunties. That's when the Black Lives Matter movement started happening, the most uncomfortable conversations I had to have were with my uncles and aunties, right? About, wait a second, what did you just say? Why did you say that, right? Why my aunt, I remember my aunt one night after we saw Selma, Ava DuVernay's amazing film on Martin Luther King. After we saw the film, I stayed over at their house, and I saw my aunt apply whitening cream to my niece's neck, who's 12. I'm like, wait, what is this? It's a whitening cream. She got it in a Korean store in downtown, Mountain View, where I grew up. So I'm like, Auntie, like, we just saw this film. Like, this is what this is about. Like, what you're telling Nicole, my cousin, you're basically telling her that her dark neck is not enough, and you're supposed to make it lighter, right? Those, to me, are important conversations that you have to be happening at home. Yes?
Okay, next, what would you recommend for students who want to pursue careers in immigration advocacy?
Oh, wait, I took a picture. Did you know about this VISTA program at this college? Michelle Bastone, I have her number and her email here. I actually just emailed this to our managing director because if Define American can partner with you all on this to become an immigrant advocate and get certified for doing it. So check that out. I think this is really exciting, and I look forward to digging more deeply into this. So I think getting to know that, and I said this in a meeting a couple of days ago. At a time we're living in right now, when it comes to like DEI work or diversity work or equity work, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're probably not doing it right. The issues that we have to address are so deep and so systematic. Like, so this conversation about driver's licenses, right? Immigration reform is not happening anytime soon. I'm sorry to say. It's not. My lawyer, one of my lawyers, I have a lot of lawyers. One of my lawyers, I turned 41 this year, and my lawyer, Maria, says to me, okay, Jose, so immigration reform is not going to happen, so you're probably going to be undocumented for a while. How are you going to spend your 40s? My first answer was skincare routine. Like, how do I make sure that, that was my first answer. The second answer was, okay, so I need to be as creatively borderless in my work. I'm gonna write books, I'm gonna produce plays, I'm writing a TV show, like I'm gonna do different kinds of work, and that's gonna make me feel borderless, right? But to me, I have to surround myself with people who actually believe that I can do that. So that's why I said what I said about, it's about finding people in your life who are gonna open windows when doors are closed, right? I think that is a key takeaway, especially at institutions like this, right? Because they're all around us. They're all, I mean, all these forms that people submit, right? We're not even thinking that we're disqualifying people just because of the language that we're using or how something is phrased.
What advice do you have for young people that only have permanent residency?
Wait, what? The people who have permanent residence but have not gotten their green cards?
That's
Is
what
that-
it seems like.
Oh. So please get your green card if you can. Hopefully you can. And then vote. Right now in this country, I was really stunned by this. There are 4 million green card holders who could be voters but have decided not to. 20 of them I'm related to. So after Trump was elected, I did like a census of my own family, my Filipino-American family, and I was just stunned at so many of my older cousins who are here legally but have decided not to become US citizens. There's a couple of reasons. Why? One reason is the costs, right? It's about $1,000 to actually go through the process. And I'm like, Auntie, you could have told me, I could have paid, right? The other thing, which I think was, for me, the more troubling part, my Aunt Rosie, who had been in this country since 1975, worked in Silicon Valley as one of the receptionists, and then ended up actually doing like product work, whatever. She goes, Ton, that's my nickname, Tagalog. Ton, we're just here to work. They don't really want us here. And then I asked her, she has a Costco card, she has a Macy's card, she has all of these things, as if America is at nothing but consumerism. She's a citizen, according to American Express, but she's not a citizen according to the US government. That's a hard conversation to have within our own families, right? Like, so I'm actually gonna work on something, because the election's about the midterms and then the presidential election. Here we are every year, we fight over the same states, Pennsylvania being one of them. Usually elections matter on like how many votes? 10,000, 20,000 votes. And you have 4 million people who could actually be voters who are not voters because either they can't afford to be a US citizen or they don't think they participate in America. That's a big one for me. And so if you can be a US citizen with a green card, please go get it. Go get your vote in honor of John Lewis, in honor of all the people that have had to fight and die just to get the right to vote.
Someone wants to know, what did Obama say when you interviewed him?
I interviewed him twice, but this was during the Iowa caucuses when he was trying to beat the guy with the hair. Do you know what I'm talking about? John Edwards? Because John Edwards was like ahead in the polls. I gotta tell you though, Obama is one of the most astute politicians I ever met. I'm looking forward, though, his second part of this memoir is about to come out. I was just in Chicago because I'm working on this book, and I was interviewing like Latino activists in Chicago who are trying to hold Obama and the Obama Library accountable to the deportation of 3 million people. And President Obama is way too smart and way too much of an intellectual to know that he can't avoid this. I would love to partner with him, actually, and make a documentary where he explains why he did it, right? And like serve as like a kind of how hard politicking and governing is. But that's a part of his legacy that I'm not sure he can keep avoiding, because he keeps avoiding it, right? We would not have gotten Trump's immigration policies without Obama's. I hate saying that out loud, but it's factually true. And if we're gonna have any credibility with anybody, I think we actually have to begin with those facts.
Do you have any recommended readings similar to your memoir?
Oh my God, a lot. Javier Zamora, a dear friend of mine, just published a book called Solito. When you read my book, you know that I was detained in Texas for 8 hours, and a lot went through my head, including Into the Woods. There's a song called No One Is Alone in Into the Woods, and I played it in my head. So I was in a detention, and I was in a jail cell. It's a jail cell. It's not a detention center. It's a jail cell, surrounded by kids, right? And they separated us by gender. So I was with the boys. And I remember in the ages 5 to 13, 14. And I remember thinking to myself, one day, one of these young kids are gonna write about what this was like. So that's what this book is about. This poet, Javier Zamora, just released it. There's another book called The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, amazing book. There's a book called, now the fact that there's now a canon, an emerging canon, a book by Grace Talusan, Filipina, up in Boston, creative writer, creative writing professor. It's about being undocumented. It's about being sexually assaulted. It's a really fascinating book. A dear friend of mine, Rafael Agustin, who's a writer for the Jane the Virgin, the TV show, he wrote a book called Illegally Yours about being undocumented. So there's quite a few. When you go to our website, Define American, you can find other stuff too. So I love that there's now more. We need more. If there are 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country, then there are 11 million ways undocumented people can tell their story, right?
How have you conquered the fear of being deported with the sense of power that I hear when listening to your story?
Power? That's cool. I don't think, after I was detained, that was the worst case scenario, right? After it happened, I was kind of this happened in July 2014. Well, what else are you gonna do? I am in this weird position where the government is more scared of me than I am of it, right? I'm ready. If you want to arrest me again, I know enough Filipino nurses that they can probably, I'm just kidding, right? If I just collected all the nurses who are Filipino, I have a nice squad going. That's not the fear anymore for me, I don't think. It's interesting how when I did this 11 years ago, that was the big fear. No, it's not that. And I think maybe the power lies in knowing that my work is borderless. That the freest part of me, you can't really lock up. Right? It's funny because that's what Toni Morrison taught me when I was a kid. And it took me actually living my life to know that. This is way bigger than some green card that I can't get. And I think I'm lucky because so many of us live our lives not really knowing what we're here for. I know what I'm here for. And that in itself, I think, is its own kind of privilege.
How do you have those conversations knowing you disagree and still make them productive?
Control your eyebrows. I think that's really, really important. I think really the first thing is people want to be heard. And I think my journalist training is okay, listen. I can't really talk if I don't listen. That's the problem, by the way, about social media in general, right? A lot of talking and not a lot of listening. So that has been a tactic for me. And when I used to go on Fox News a lot, actually the last time I was on Fox News is in this book. Because Tucker Carlson, I've known Tucker Carlson since forever. Because he's your professional. And to me, what's astounding to me though, and what I'm offended by, is Tucker is considered a journalist. I'm wait, in what planet? Wait, he's not a journalist. He's a really good actor. He's been playing that role since I was in high school. And he does it really well, right? And then I was on a show, I think Trump was about to get elected, or Trump was already elected. And this tells you a lot about how television works. It was a live thing, right? I'm about to go on the show, I'm on the studio in DC, and then I get there, I try to do this like calming, cleansing thing before I go on TV to control my face. And then Tucker goes, I should have called ICE. It would have made for better TV. Then 3 seconds later, we go live. And of course, my face is like, what the? That's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to like get me all flustered up and be like, and he won, by the way. He won. Because then when we went live, what did people see on TV? This angry, illegal person who looks like Jeff Chang, but has Jose Antonio Vargas as his name. I'm already confusing on TV, right? And so that was the last time I went on Fox News, was that time. They asked me a lot, because I don't even know what Fox News would do without immigrants. Like, they owe us a lot of money. Like, they build an entire programming all around us, right? One time they were actually thinking about offering me like a contract to be like one of their talking heads. Again, it's like theater, right? I'm supposed to play a role. So I don't do Tucker Carlson. I don't do Ann Coulter. I'm not interested in talking to people who actually don't want to talk, right? Which means they don't want to listen. So as much as possible, I try to meet people where they're at. And the one thing I forgot to tell you is this. When I was working on white people, this MTV documentary, it's on YouTube, you can check it out. We did a study with, I think it was Pew, the research center. And this was interesting to me. 3/4 of white people that were surveyed, right, lived in predominantly white towns and had predominantly white friends, which meant your exposure to people of color is limited by the media you consume, right? I thought, and because I grew up in the Bay Area in San Francisco, where it was the first minority majority, I was so used to everybody being around me all the time that I should have known that, having visited the rest of the country. Like, in most places, you know, when I go to, I'm about to go to Jackson, Mississippi, right? I know the first thing I'm going to do is go to the Walmart and figure out if there's an ethnic aisle. You know, there's an aisle in the grocery store for like the Asian food and the Latino food. I go to that aisle to see who lives in this community. And then either I get a little, that's how I know what town I'm entering, right? But most Americans, most white Americans, their views of us is limited by the media they consume, right? When I was a reporter decades ago now, I did a story on Grand Theft Auto, the video game, and how a lot of young white suburban kids play that game, and so many of their visions around Black and Latino perception came from like playing a lot of these like video games. And I followed suburban kids from Virginia and compared how they played the game versus how like Mexican kids in South Central LA played the game, and compared it. It was really interesting, actually. It's a long time ago, but yeah. Any other questions?
We have one more.
One more, okay, great.
Why do you often speak specifically to colleges, and what do you hope that we take away from this talk today?
Oh, I think we asked that. Yeah, we did.
How do you feel about this government leadership today? Biden.
Oh. Someone's recording me. Hey.
We are at time.
How do I feel? I actually covered Biden in 2008. He was one of the 12 people running for president back then. Because, you know, he's run for president like a lot of times, and I'm just glad that he like won it. Democrats are absolutely better on this issue than Republicans are. Absolutely. And that's because now we have enough Democrats who actually have the lived experience of this issue. How AOC talks about the issue to me is always so personal, because it is personal to her. The Grijalva in Arizona, the congressman from Arizona. But at the end of the day, for Republicans, immigration is like probably one of their top 2 issues. Top 2, right? For Democrats, it doesn't even crack the top 5. so many of the surveys, legalizing marijuana is a bigger issue for Democrats than legalizing people. And hey, I'm happy if you want to get high, amazing, congratulations, right? But I just find that so interesting. The state of Oregon, where I got my driver's license, the same year that Oregon made it legal, made marijuana legal in Oregon, is the same year they took away and documented people's right to drive in the state of Oregon. Now, it shouldn't be us versus them, you know, but I just find it really interesting that within Democrats, this is an issue that they campaign on over and over again and never prioritizes. And that's just not Biden. That's Kamala Harris. And that, I don't, okay, I've said enough. I'm definitely in the next few months, because I don't like going on TV. I really don't like going on TV. But in the next few months, because of the midterms, I am going to be way more vocal about this. Because the reality is, this administration has not done enough at all. DACA is about to be taken away. By the way, what are you going to do here in Pennsylvania? When I was looking at the numbers, you have about 5,000 DACA recipients in this state. So once they lose their work status, what are you going to do? Right? Are you going to keep employing them as independent contractors? How are you going to get them health insurance? Or are you going to say, oh, I'm so sorry, now we can't hire you anymore? Is that what you're going to do? I'm curious, you know, like, I don't know if there are DACA employees in this university. Great, so we should have a conversation about like what that means, right? If DACA gets taken away, which unfortunately will happen. The last thing I'll say, now I'm being depressing. Now I'm going to be depressing here. I wonder if it's because immigration is not a priority for this country because we have kind of this like delusional, this book that I'm working on now is about whiteness as a construct, right? And it was inspired when I was at the University of Georgia in Athens, a conservative school, and I was being debated by this college Republican kid. And I, you know, people of color always get asked where I'm from. Like, where are you from? Like, where are you from? So I've gotten in the habit in the past decade of asking white people where they're from. Where are you from? So I asked this young man, and he goes, you know, I'm American. I'm like, I know you're American, but like, where are you from? And he goes, well, I'm white. Well, but white is not a country. Where are you from? He didn't know. And then I think to myself, wait a second. So how can you ask me where I'm from and how I got here if you don't know where you're from and how you got here? So that kind of collective amnesia, like, I don't know, how did the Irish and the Italians and Germans, how did they just get to be white? Do they even want that? I don't know, right? And then the country is now less and less white. In the state of California and Texas, 50% of all public school kids, K to 12, are Latino or Latino. In the state of California, where I'm from, Latinos and Asians together make up 65% of the state. So where do they fit in your black or white binary? That's what my next book is about. And I think that one is going to get me deported. But hey, it's all right. It's cool. Thank you for having me here and for this incredibly welcome, warm welcome that you all have given me. Thank you.